Hey, this is Daniel Grove. Thanks for checking out this video. I love sci-fi, I love space, and I love making planets in Blender. It became kind of an addiction for a while, and it was really fun to finally learn how to make what I wanted to make. So in this video, I'm going to share with you how to create your own custom planets in Blender. Okay, so first I'm going to show you how to make the planet, the light, set up the procedural starry sky, and we're going to apply textures to these spheres, as well as atmosphere and clouds, and a bunch of other little tricks to make it look photorealistic. And up front, I do want to be clear about this. These are not procedural planet textures. I'm using texture images that I've gotten from a variety of sources online that were at the time free. However, now the good ones that I have, the artist does charge for them. They're only like $2 each. I'll put all the links for everything free and paid in the description down below. So go buy them. They're cheap. Any of you guys out there that are like surface painter pros and are really good at texture painting, please make some planets. There's a big market out there for people like us that love to make planets. And as far as I can find, there's not a lot out there that's available. So please, somebody make us some planet textures to play with that are high resolution and look great. My favorite artist that I've found online is Robert Stein III. He also goes by Duale. He made a bunch of them that I got. They were free like years ago. Now he only charges about $2 for each of them. Again, the link for that it will be down below. But when you're looking for textures to apply to these planet spheres, this is a really big, they need to be equal rectangular maps. That means it's a 1:2 ratio rectangular image, and it wraps around a sphere perfectly because the top looks a little squished and weird. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, two more quick things before we get to making our planets. I'm using Blender 2.91.0, and the two add-ons that I will be using in this project, which are free, is UV Squares and Node Wrangler. I think Node Wrangler is now included in Blender because it's awesome. UV Squares is also very helpful. You can find that on GitHub, and I'll put the link for that down below as well. Okay, so let's make this scene. So I've got a sun here. I'm going to make sure it's set to sun. I'm going to put the brightness to 4. I'm going to Shift A for add. I'm going to add a sphere, a UV sphere. Now down here in the options, let's increase the polygon count, maybe for segments 80 and rings, I don't know, 40 or 60, something like that. And let's size it up. You can do S2 to scale it up by 2 and maybe again. It really doesn't matter how big it is, it's all relative, but I like it to be kind of large. I'm going to press W and get this object context menu, and I'm going to choose Shade Smooth. That's going to get rid of all the polygons and add that smooth shading all around. Next, let's go to our world properties. I'm going to open up the node view, which I'm going to expand this by putting my mouse in the very top corner. It turns into a crosshair, click and drag down, and I'm going to change this view to the shader editor, okay? And I'm going to change to world mode. And here we go, this is our world. So I'm going to show you real quick how to make the starry sky. It's very easy. If you're new to nodes, don't worry. This is probably one of the easiest tricks you'll see. So we're going to add a Voronoi. So Shift A for add, click on search and type in VOR. There we go. Now Shift A, click on search and type in RAM for ramp. There's color ramp right there. There's the second one. Plug in color to the input there, and then plug in this color to right there. All right, now I need to switch to render view so we can actually see the world we're building behind us. Let's zoom out a little bit. We've got this crazy Voronoi texture. I think it's actually distance. Let me try that. Yeah, there we go. We want the dots, these little cellular dots, okay? Now, let me zoom in so you can see this more clearly, okay? We're gonna change our scale to anywhere between 200 and 400. Let's start with 200. There we go. Look at all those dots. Now, they're not stars yet, but they will be. So let's drag our black point up and our white point, flip-flop it. Boom, look at that. We've got dots. And they are, in fact, dots of light, because if you look at the procedural pattern that was being created, they're all circulars. They're not like cell shapes. They're not jagged polygonal cell pieces. They are circular. So we can do that. We can control the brightness. If we move the black in, it makes it, let me get rid of my ground. There we go. You can click on this overlay button, by the way, to get rid of all overlays, including the ground. Beautiful starry night. If you drag our black up, it adds, the stars get bigger to the point where they're just blobs. So don't go too high. Keep it around, 0.15 and higher. If you want less stars, move it over to the left. Want more, drag it back closer to dot two. But I want to put it like at dot one. Pretty nice. Okay, boom, look at that. Two nodes, and you have a procedural, never ending, seamless starry sky. You are welcome. Okay, and we've got our sphere, we've got our sun. Let's turn our overlays back on. There we go. And I'm going to turn off the ground, or the floor rather, because we're not modeling anything. We don't really need a floor grid. Let's press the letter 0 to get to our camera. If you don't have a camera, you'll need to press Shift A and add camera right there. And then when you press the numpad 0, it'll go to camera view. I'm going to zoom my camera out by right-clicking on the border, or where on my computer I have right-click for select. You may have left-click select. And I'm going to press GZ and then Z again. Now I can zoom out on the normal of the camera. It's basically zooming in and out. Okay. And we're going to go to the camera settings. Let's put this focal length up at a high number, maybe 100 right there. So a higher millimeter focal length is going to give more of a telescopic look, which is the opposite of a wide angle lens. Most space photography we see is, of course, telescopic lenses, very high focal length, probably up in the thousands. But we're going to stick with 100 to 200 to give it a nice flat look. All right, let's get to making this planet texture. So I'm going to select my planet, and I'm going to switch my node editor back to object. And this does not have a texture yet, so I'm going to click new, and I'm going to name it. This is really big, especially if you're going to make multiple planets in one Blender file. Name everything. Name the objects and name the materials very well, because you'll get really confused on what's what. So I'm going to name this Planet 1 Surface, because we are going to have multiple spheres on top of each other for the different parts of the planet. There's going to be one for clouds and the atmosphere around the edge. Okay, so we've got Planet 1 surface. Now there's no nodes here. There are nodes, but you can't see them, and I don't want to go searching for them. So here's the trick. Press A, which will select all the nodes, and then press your period num keypad, and it basically solos in on whatever is selected, or all that is selected. So that is an easy way to not get lost or get unlost in your node editor. Okay, I'm going to press Shift A, search image. Here we go. I'm going to drag the color to base color. Now I'm going to leave, I don't want it right here. We need to leave some room in between the two, because we will be eventually adding a bunch of stuff here to make things look more awesome. Oh, so we need room. So I'm going to open an image. And I'm going to go to my planets folder, one of my favorite folders on my hard drive. And this has a collection of real scans, real images, as well as fictitious planets by that Robert Steen III guy, who you can find the links down below. Really awesome work. And there are websites where you can get real images of our planets and moons, which are good to play with. You can tweak them. You can mix and match them. You can, of course, change the color. There's a lot you can do with real images. So if you just want to stick to free images, don't worry. You can still make some cool stuff. So I'm going to open up an image of Mars. Very easy to find those online. Click open. And now look at this. It's automatically mapped perfectly. I did not even unwrap this sphere yet. I think that Blender knows that this image is a 2x1 image, or is an equirectangular shape. It's a perfect 1x2 rectangle image, which means it's going to wrap perfectly around a sphere. Let me show you how it does it. Look at this. If I press tab, go into edit mode of the sphere, this is all the faces and the triangles on top, because there are some triangles in the sphere on the top. So what's going on here with this unwrapping is basically the center of the image here is the center of the planet. I'll show you by selecting and turn this on. There we go. So if I select the equator this way, it's in the middle of the image. If I select one of the poles, it's up top. Let me do faces. It'll be easier to see. There we go. So this pole is on the top, South Pole on the bottom. And the reason why the image looks funny is because this top radius is so narrow, it's basically 0, which is right here at the tip. As we go down the image, a few pixels down, the radius it's larger, which is here around the edge of this ice cap. And as we go down, of course, the radius increases of the sphere. So things are getting larger. So that's why on the image, it's stretched, but it's going to be wrapped into a tiny pole on the top and bottom. So yeah, now we've got our Mars made. Now, if you have trouble unwrapping this, if it doesn't happen automatically like it did for me, one thing you can do is you can use the UV Squares add-on and tab, select all, press U and unwrap. And then you can go to UV and UVs to grid squares, or UVs to grid with respect to shape. And that will basically make any shape into square faces on your UV unwrapper screen. And it's very helpful. That's why I love that UV Squares add-on. And honestly, maybe that's what's getting me this perfect unwrap. I don't know. So I'm using cycles right now, and I am in my rendered view. So this is like real-time rendering with cycles. The reason why it's so quick is because there's really no ray tracing happening. There's no samples being used right now because I've got one object floating in space and there's no light bouncing on anything. So let's go into our nodes for the planet texture. Okay, so I've rearranged my screen layout to be a little bit more visible for you guys, especially if you're on a smaller screen. Now we've got specular, which is the amount of shine that the sun's going to give on the surface. And we've got roughness. If we have roughness at 0, it's basically a perfectly reflective glass sphere at this point. If we put any other stars or planets around it, it's going to start reflecting things. So we don't want roughness at 0. We want it, somewhere in the mid range. Because if you look at pictures of the Earth, you can see the sun is kind of giving a specular, spot on the ocean, but not on the land. We'll get to that later. So you can play with your specular and your roughness to get it somewhere where you think is realistic. One good way to add some realism to the surface sphere is to give it some bump. So let's do Shift A, search, type in bump, enter, put it down here. You notice these dots are purple now, not yellow, because they're not carrying color data like this one is. It's carrying normals data. So drag the normals, connect it to this normal of the principled BSDF. Now we need some information to turn into the bump, which we're going to use this color data from the image texture and put it in height. Now look at that. This is super crunchy, not realistic. You can't see this much detail from space. It's just not how things work. So we're going to turn down strength to 0.1 and distance to 0.1. You can do a little bit more if you don't see enough result, maybe 0.2, but don't go up too high because when things are like really bumpy, it kind of ruins the illusion, right? But you do want a little bit of bump to give some more detail on the texture. Now, the higher resolution your image is, of course, the better your planet's going to look closer up. If you've only got a 2K image, you can't get in really close. Got an 8K image, that's a different story. Okay, so we've got our surface sphere here. I'm going to make next a cloud sphere, which is not really realistic for Mars. So I'm going to do Shift D, enter. So I just duplicated this sphere. If you look over here, I did name this. I'm going to name sphere as Planet 1 surface. There we go. Sphere 002 is going to be Planet 1 clouds. There we go. And we are going to give this a new texture because right now the cloud sphere has the same texture as the surface sphere. We don't want that. So I'm going to just click X. So there's no texture, add a new texture. I'm going to name this P1 cloud for planet 1. Okay. And it's the same size as the surface sphere, so we can't see the cloud sphere yet. If we click S and scale it, we can, of course, but we're going to scale it up just a little bit bigger than the surface sphere. So press S for scale and do 1.01. Here we go. So it is just a little bit bigger than the bottom sphere underneath it. Now we're going to play with transparency and use a cloud texture, which you can also get this one for free online to give it some clouds. So I added an image node. I'm going to go back to my planets. And there's a really good image you can find online of the Earth's clouds, 8K. That's awesome. Open image, and here it is. I'm going to connect this to base color. Now we just got the clouds. There's no transparency. I can't see Mars underneath. That's where this comes in handy. So if you click on a node and press the letter G, that's grab, which is basically your move tool. You can rearrange things. I'm going to do Shift A, type in mix shader. Shift A again, type in transparent right there, and drag this green to the very first shader spot. There we go. And automatically everything's working, okay? I can see transparency through to Mars. But that's because we have a slider here. So it's basically a crossfader in between the two. But I want to get rid of the black parts and make it transparent. So we're going to use this image as a mask. So click on color, drag it over to factor, and voila. Now we can control how selective this mask is by making a color ramp. So Shift A, ramp right there. Make sure it's on the line that's going from image ping ponging over to factor. Now we can control the mask. We can make it, barely any clouds, or drag the black down and drag the white up and basically get a lot of that image texture. And look at this. We even have some shadow from the clouds hitting the surface, which is cool. Maybe a little bit too much distance there. You could probably size this sphere down just a little bit. Using Shift, you can scale things down much more minutely. There we go. That looks good. A little bit of blackness under those clouds is a good thing. And also because this is a separate sphere, you can press RR to just freely rotate your cloud sphere anywhere you want. And that looks pretty cool too. We're going to now make an atmosphere sphere on top of this. That's fun. Atmosphere sphere. Shift D to duplicate that, and S1.01 to size that up a little bit. Now let's name everything. Planet 1 atmosphere. And just do Atmo. Let me size this up a little bit so you can see it. Atmo. Okay. Now, instead of deleting this texture and making a brand new one like we did earlier, I'm going to do new material, but basically it's going to copy what you have, but make a new material. So, because we're going to use this transparency trick, but in a different way. So we need to name this P1 Atmo. Okay. We've got our surface, our cloud, and our Atmo on top. Let's delete this image, this, and this. There we go. Now we're going to add a diffuse shader, super basic. Now we're going to add a layer weight, which is basically like a Fresnel. It's going to give us this edge, this soft edges, and then a color ramp, RAM, color ramp here. Now let's plug in Fresnel into here, color into factor. All right. Now, if we Control Shift click on this Fresnel or layer weight node, we can see it's giving us a circular gradient, but it's not quite dark enough. That's where this color ramp comes in. And by the way, this is using Node Wrangler to basically preview one node at a time. So Control Shift this guy. Now we can see what this gradient's going to do. Ooh, look at that. Nice. Here's a cool trick. You can expand the size of your gradient node for a higher resolution. There we go. And also to make it super smooth, which is what we're going for, change this to B-spline. Okay, so we want this to be white on the edges, which it is there, and black in the center. Now, B-spline is super soft and non-aggressive gradient. It's very organic, which is great, but we need to add a little bit more punch in the middle. So add another color, drag it over here, and make it pure black. Maybe move it down a little bit. There we go. Okay, and then around the edges, we also want this to fade away. So let's use the plus key to zoom in, and we're going to make a little bit of black around the very edge of the sphere. So add another color by clicking the plus, drag it up here, and make it black. Okay, now I need to drag it in so we can actually see it. There it is. It's coming in right next to the white. Cool. So it's black in the center, white, and then it fades off, kind of like the atmosphere does around a planet. Awesome. Okay, let's zoom back out. And let's use this as a mask. Also, no matter where your camera angle is, the circle stays how it is. That's how Fresnel works. So we're going to use this as a mask, and we're going to plug it into the mix shader right here. So Control Shift this guy to get it back to normal. This is how it should look. There we go. Let me zoom out to show you what's going on. Okay, so the Fresnel is giving us this. The gradient is giving it contrast to look like this. Is plugging into here as the mask, which is giving us a mix of diffuse, which is this guy. I'll give it a color, blue, and transparent right here. See, these two guys are getting mixed by this circular gradient. So we can change the atmosphere color by, of course, giving it a diffuse color. For alien planets, you can do some toxic color like green or yellow or purple or pink. Light blue is a safe one if you want to go for like an oxygen, habitable planet, which Mars is not. There's like very little gas in the atmosphere there. But, I'm just using this image because everyone can get this image online. And you can change how much atmosphere there is by playing with this gradient. It's so much fun. So if you feel like your planet is super green, lots of oxygen generating organisms and ocean and stuff like that, give it a lot of atmosphere, make it real nice and friendly looking like that. But if it's more deadly, make it more of a little rim and give it a scary color too. That's nice. Let's rewind and go back to our surface sphere, and I'm going to show you how to mix textures to give some more interesting and more complex looks. So I'm going to turn off my atmosphere and turn off my cloud meshes so I don't see them. They'll still render, but I can't see them. And if your outliner doesn't look like mine, you can change it by clicking on the little funnel and turn on the screen and the render button. The screen basically means it's not being processed by your CPU or RAM, but it will still render because the camera is turned on. All right, so we've got Mars, but what if I want to mix in a little bit of something else? Let's click on the Mars texture node, Shift D to duplicate it. Let's open up a different texture. I'm going to open up this one of Mercury because, again, I feel like this is one I'm sure you guys could find online for free. So we're going to do Mix RGB, which allows you to crossfade or mix or blend RGB, color signals, which this is. So with Mercury in color 1 and Mars in color 2, we can crossfade 0, which is all Mercury, and 1 is all Mars. But what if it's in the middle, 0.5? Now it's half Mars, half Mercury. We can change the color of Mercury to add some more interesting looks by doing Shift A, type in hue saturation. Now, let me zoom in. We can move the hue slider and change the color of Mercury. Cool. Mercury's got some really nice impacts on it that I like, and streaks. It's really cool. So we can mix between these two. We can use blend modes just like Photoshop has. We can do darken. Overlay is really cool. By the way, turn this all the way up if you're using blend modes. Well, unless it's too much, you can also turn it down. But I personally like multiply, soft light, and overlay to get some cool mixing of the two. Or you can use a texture or a procedural texture to mix these two together. So I'm going to turn this all the way up, and I'm going to add a noise texture, and this is going to work as our mask. Plug in factor to factor of the mix RGB. And now if I preview this by doing Control Shift, click on the noise texture, I get this kind of blurry noise. I can make it more gritty and more textured by turning up detail and turning up roughness. We of course have scale, but it's really faint. I don't know why it's so faint. So I'm going to add some contrast with a color ramp. Drag the black point up. There we go. Make sure you're previewing the color ramp. So Control Shift to click that right there. Now, if I plug this color in to factor of the mix RGB, we need to get back to a normal view. Look, right now I'm viewing this gradient. I don't want to see that anymore. I want to see this guy. So Control Shift, click right there. All right, so I'm using a contrasting noise texture as my mask. If I make it really contrasty, which is this, by the way, it's very black or white. Look at that. We've got some Mars peeking through and some Venus peeking through. You can flip-flop them by switching them from color 1 to color 2, just like that. Pretty cool. Of course, we've got our color control. Awesome. We've got a viral outbreak, turning the planet into a sentient celestial object. And back in our textures there. Lots of things going on. Lots of possibilities. You just got to be creative and play around with it. All right, let's add a moon real quick. So I'm going to zoom out, Shift A, add a sphere. I'm going to move this up here and just make a texture real quick. If you have Node Wrangler enabled, you can also click on this shader and press Control T, move it over here, click Open. I'm going to open up a moon texture I have somewhere in here. Where is it? All right. And now if I press period, because I have the moon selected, it zooms right into it. And there we have our moon. I see these ridges because it's not smooth. So W, shade smooth. There we go. We need to add a lot of bump. Moons are messed up. Moons have very imperfect surfaces. So we can put this pretty bumpy, more than we did the planet. There we go. Let's zoom back out. Make it a little bit smaller. Move it out here. There we go. Here's a cool trick. We can make this moon automatically rotate around itself. If you want to do that, go to the object information and pick your axis, whether it's, I'll do the Z axis. Click on it and press hashtag or number sign, frame, multiply by 0.01. Let's see how that goes. I'm going to go to my material view so it's faster. Shift spacebar to press play. There we go. So the number sign means frame, or number sign frame means put the frame number in that spot. And then you can multiply it by smaller or bigger numbers, to make it faster or slower. We need to start parenting things to the surface of the planet. So single click on your surface mesh over here in the outliner, then shift, cloud, and atmosphere. And now we can press Control P, which is the parenting feature, and do keep transform. So now, look at this, they're gone, but they're actually inside of the surface. So if we click on surface planet, move it around, look at that. The atmosphere and the cloud sphere stay with the surface. Now, for ease of arranging your scene, you can actually turn off the selectability of the atmosphere and the clouds. So if I select this, I can't select the atmosphere or the clouds here. It's actually selecting the surface, which allows me to move it around, rotate it, all kinds of stuff. So with the surface planet selected, let's go to our object information. I'm just going to do Y, number sign, frame, multiply by 0.01, and press play. Now I'm in I'm in rendered view, so it's trying to re-render every frame. If I go to material view, the atmosphere kind of gets funky. So I'm going to turn off atmosphere. My clouds also look kind of funky, so I'll just turn those off for now. There we go. We got our Mars rotating, and our moon is not parented to this yet. So I'm going to select the moon, select the planet, Control P, keep transform. There we go. We've got an orbiting moon and planet. So let's pick a nice angle and render this thing. I'm going to show you a trick for orbiting your camera around a planet. Press Shift C to put your 3D cursor right in the middle. Go into your camera view, select your camera by right clicking on the border right there, and then change your, I guess it's point of origin to 3D cursor. So now if I press RR to freely rotate my camera, it's rotating my camera around that 3D cursor, which is where? Right in the middle of the planet. So let's get a nice view right here. Grab our sun. We can also rotate that. Look at this around the origin. And I'll go into rendered view to see what's going on here. Oh, let's turn back on our other spheres and make it look pretty. Nice. Now remember, the sun is not actually here in orbit. It's super far away, right? This planet is going around the star. So the direction of this, it looks kind of funny because the moon is right here, but it would really be like, light years away over there. Wow, so there's our render. It looks pretty awesome for a very small amount of work. Now, there's a lot of tweaks you can add to add more texture or interest to your planet. Right off the bat, I'm seeing my stars are way too large. So I'm going to size those down by going back to my node editor here. And I'll show you a few more tweaks we can do for the planet. I'm going to increase the scale to 400 and then drag this in a little bit. So the dots are smaller, but there's more of them. Cool. Now we can use procedural textures to add more variation, like we did up here. You can even use a noise texture for a really nice cloud effect. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Add noise. I'm going to add it to here instead of this image texture and add this right here instead of that image texture. Now this is super blah and boring. So remember, we need to add some contrast. So I'm actually going to put it like this: noise into color ramp going into these guys over here. Again, I am editing my cloud texture that we made earlier. So drag your black point up. That, not impressive, I know, but wait, there's more. Increase your scale, increase your detail, and your roughness. We're getting there, we're getting there. And now here's where the magic is. I'm gonna get a better view here. Here's where the magic happens. Increase your distortion just a little bit. Look at that. Get some really nice wavy clouds. And if it's too cloudy, you can always turn that down by playing with your color ramp. If you go one way, it's going to add more cloud. If you go the other, it's going to go less. And of course, you've also got scale. So you make them very large, wispy clouds. And that looks pretty natural. Even for a procedural texture, not bad. If you combine that with some Musgrave, gritty texture, you can get some more imperfections. Musgrave is also good for adding dirt onto the planet. So let's do that. So I'm going to click on surface up here. I'm going to get rid of my atmosphere and my clouds. I'm also going to get rid of these guys up here. And we're just going to add in some Musgrave texture on top of the Mars surface. So grab height, put it in color 2. Now it's on mixed mode right here, mix, and it's at number 1. It's all the way up. So that means I can see nothing but color number 2, which is this guy, okay? If we go to 0, that's Mars, 1 is Musgrave. So let's zoom in. I'm going to increase the scale, increase detail to 16, dimension to 0. Now already we get this really gritty texture. If you raise your dimension, you'll get softer and less dirt. You can use this to generate oceans or land masses or clouds or just variation in your color of a texture that you already have. So let's put this as multiply and turn it to 0 and then slowly turn it up a little bit. Look what happens as we get up to closer to dot 5. Look at that. The black parts of the Musgrave texture are now overlaying on top of the Mars texture and they're making them darker. So this automatically doesn't even look like Mars anymore. Okay, so this is cool and all. So what about oceans? Let's get a more green planet texture, say Earth. And let's make the ocean reflective. So let's get rid of this guy, get rid of the mix, zoom out, plug in your Earth texture into base color. There we go. Super basic, nothing crazy going on, right? But this blue ocean is just flat. It just does not look cool. And the continents and the ocean reflect the same amount of light. That's not physically, accurate. So let's add a color ramp. Put it here in the middle. Drag your Earth texture to the color ramp, and then your color ramp to roughness. All right, here's where things are going to get more interesting. As we make your gradient generally brighter, we're getting less reflection on the land, more on the ocean. What if we reverse it? We make it darker. Look at that. The land is wet and shiny, as well as the ocean is too. But we don't want that. We want the land to basically be not reflective and the ocean to be reflective. Play with the specular here. The roughness is coming from the color gradient. So there. So as the sun moves over the landmass, we see those little blue dips, which is the water shining, and the ocean shiny. That's good. So again, this gradient is black is all the way to the left. White is pretty far to the left as well, around 0.15 to give that look. Let's add in the cloud texture, which is Earth's, and let's put it back to the normal Earth cloud map so it looks, correct. There we go. We got some Earth clouds and add in our atmosphere. Here we go. We got a nice blue shining atmosphere, maybe a little bit too much atmosphere. We move things to the right. Remember, it makes it less atmosphere. Let's add some texture to this atmosphere layer to make it more interesting looking. So I'm going to make this like a poisoned looking, this is where we're heading basically in the future. Okay, so we got that. Now let's let's use mix RGB to mix some Musgrave texture into this atmosphere. So Shift A Musgrave, Shift A RGB, which is the mix RGB, there it is. And we're going to mix it with this right here. Put your Musgrave in the bottom, color number 2. Put into multiply. And let's do the similar settings that we did earlier, which is 16 detail, 0 dimension. There we go. We've already got this really pretty looking thing. Let's add more atmosphere to make it more visible. There we go. So instead of it being a smooth, circle gradient of atmosphere, it's all blotchy and imperfect. So if we go to 0, smooth gradient, all the way up though, Musgrave all over the place. So you might not want all the way, maybe somewhere in the middle. But that gives a nice, it breaks up the perfect atmosphere, gives some more imperfection. All right, now let's say you want to make a gas giant, probably the easiest kind of planet to make. So select your surface. Let's open up a Jupiter image. Now we want to get rid of our bump. So just put your strength at 0. There's no bump on a gas giant because it's all clouds. All right, now let's add a ring around it. So make sure your cursor is in the middle. You can do Shift C. Now Shift A and add a circle. Let's raise this to about 100 vertices. S to scale the circle up. Now the circle is just an empty circle. It's not even a mesh yet. So go to Tab and press the letter F to fill it. So the circle is now a filled in circle, which is a disk. Now press I for inset. Put it like that and delete that center face. There we go. We've got our ring. Now we need to add a texture to it. So texture, new, name it ring. Shift A, add an image texture. Now I happen to have an 8K image of Saturn's rings right here. I'm going to click open image, connect it to base color right there. This of course does not look right. So let's expand and get our UV unwrapping editor right here. Tab, A for all, U, and unwrap. Now I don't see anything here. Oh, there they are. They're as rings. I don't want them to be rings. I want them to be straight. So let's go to UV and let's try UVs to grid as squares. Didn't do anything. Oh, because we have to turn off this sync button. Right, again, UV, I have to select them all. UV, grid as squares. There we go. Now they're all squares next to each other. That's perfect. But I'm not sure which direction they're going. So let's select one and then the one next to it. They're going this way. So we need to rotate this by 90 degrees. So A for all, R 90. Now SX to scale along the X axis. Look at that. It's already coming into the view there. Looks sweet. Now, this scaling doesn't really matter because this image is just gradient lines, basically. They're the same. So that looks great. Now, it's not to scale, astronomical scale. I don't really care about that right now. But that's good enough for me. Now, this image actually has alpha. This is a PNG with an alpha channel, which is great because the rings are not, solid. You can see through them a little bit. They are just pieces of ice after all. So select the ring. Let's get rid of our UV editor. And we actually have an alpha channel. So let's do that. Shift A, mix shader. Here, Shift A, transparent, plug that into shader number 2, and then use the alpha channel right there. Ah, look at that. Semi-transparent rings. Looks great. Now I need to align them with the shape of the planet, the orientation of the planet. I'm going to press number 3, RR to kind of dip them. Go to different side views to get the, there we go. Now it's going along with the planet. You can make them smaller by going into tab, edge select, and then alt click the outer edge and just scale it in. You can make it really narrow. You can make it huge, Super Saturn kind of thing. Lots of possibilities. And you can just make a gradient to make this texture. You can find all kinds of, textures to use as a ring. Just have fun with that. All right, one last thing is I'm going to show you how to add some glowing portions to add some sci-fi, creepy element to a planet. So I'm going to open up a really rocky surface. Let's just use I'm going to grab this one because it has some really dark portions. And I want these portions and these lines, which are really beautiful, to glow. So let's clean her up. Let's clean up our nodes a little bit. We don't really care about the ocean trick. Bump, we can put that back up to like 0.2, 0.3. Give it some scratchiness. This is a not nice planet. Now we're going to move this material output over because we need room for a mix shader and then also an emissions. So emissions is going to go into slot number 2. Now we're mixing between normal planet and emissions. We're going to make a mask out of this texture to tell it what's going to glow and what's not. So Shift A, color ramp, plug in color to there, and then color output to factor. All right, so let's make this color just red, really red, and turn it up to like 3, pretty bright. Now, when we play with this color ramp, let's see if I can go into material mode to make this a little bit quicker. Yeah, it doesn't look as pretty, but you'll get the point. So as I play with this color ramp, I can basically select what areas are going to glow and what's not. So let's try this side. I don't want that. I want the opposite. We can reverse the gradient to get the opposite effect. There we go. That's getting closer to what I wanted. Maybe if we change the gradient type, that'll make it a little bit smoother. I put it as cardinal. And let's go back into render view. Cool. So we've got glowing pieces like lava and then non-glowing pieces. These glowing pieces are a little bit boring. So we can spice them up by adding some variation with a moose grave texture. So Shift A, moose grave. Shift A, color ramp, because we need to give it some color. Put that there, color into color. And now when the moose grave looks terrible, let's size it like way up, detail up, dimension maybe 0.1. There we go. And now we need to make this black, red. And then the white, we have, we can do color gradients now. You can do it red to orange, red to yellow, whatever you want to do. Cool. Maybe make it more of a subtle thing there. Awesome. So see what we did is we're mixing between a planet surface shader, which is this with an image, and the emissions, which the color of the emissions is from a colorized Musgrave texture. You can control the brightness of that, but I like, 3 and up. 10 might be a bit much. If you have your glow turned on in your render, it'll look really cool. And of course, when you render this, even though there's shadow on the planet, the emissions will still glow. You can use that for cities, lava, lightning storms, whatever you want. Whew, well, I think that is about it for the basics. I could probably do a part 2 advanced planet tutorial for more things like volumetrics and more advanced procedural stuff. I'll see how the reception is in this video, and I may or may not do a part 2. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope you had fun following this tutorial. If you have a planet render that you're proud of, send it to my email down below. I'd love to see what you guys make. Maybe I'll show it on a future video. That would be cool. I don't know. But I hope you followed along. And be sure to subscribe to this channel so I know that you guys like this type of video and I'll make more of them. Thanks for watching. Hope you're here again soon.